And our next company up is Poolbeg Pharma, who, as you probably know, are the AIM-listed pharma business which was spun out from its famous parents, Open Orphan. They spun out in July and they raised £25 million. Poolbeg is targeting the infectious diseases market, which is expected to exceed $250 billion by 2025. POLB's initial assets come from Open Orphan, the infectious disease and human challenge trials business. That's the one that you know all about, which means Poolbeg has access to knowledge, experience, and clinical data from 20 years of clinical challenge trials. The company has already inherited a phase 2 ready influenza immune modulator and says it hopes to acquire new assets. Here with us tonight to shed more light on the business are Jeremy Skillington, CEO, and Cathal Friel, Chairman.
Good evening, Donald. And I'll let Cathal give a little bit of background to where we came from, and I'll talk at length about where we're going.
Yeah, so look, folks, delighted to be speaking here from Whitechapel in East London. It's dark outside in the offices. This is the Open Orphan Poolbeg office. So look, the background, look, I'm very excited. We've had a good run with Open Orphan. We've a lot more running to do there. As they always say, what's that space between now and Christmas? We won't disappoint you, the long-suffering shareholders. But tonight's about Poolbeg. Where did it come from? What we're trying to build a leading infectious disease company. Poolbeg Pharma successfully spun out of Open Orphan in July 21, raising 25 million, a heavily oversubscribed fundraise. And basically, look, the background is hVIVO is a clinical trials company. Clinical trials company should not be competing with our customers. Pfizer, the CEO of Pfizer announced earlier this summer that we did a cracking phase 2 RSV study for them. That was in Open Orphan hVIVO. And naturally, the CEO of Pfizer doesn't mention many small companies like us. I'm sure he'd be quite pissed off if we turned around and said, by the way, Mr. Pfizer, we have a better product than yours. But we might have. And that's where Poolbeg comes in. So the assets are in Poolbeg, and Jeremy's job is really to drive Poolbeg. But I think, look, there's probably a bit of confusion. And the reason I'm so excited, it's always great to have something unique. Poolbeg is absolutely unique. Bear in mind, my first pharma company now, Big Pharma, Donald used to present maybe 8 years ago, was formerly known as Fasted Oil and Gas, a little 20 million struggling company. Amrit now is $1 billion enterprise value, did 200 million last year, 300 million this year. So look, we've big plans, and Poolbeg, I think, will go up many, many multiples in the months, not years ahead. But why is it unique? It's unique in that we're not falling in love. There's going to be a host of assets. Jeremy's under pressure and he will get them in. Over the next couple of months, we'll have between 6 and 8 additional assets like POLB 001. We're not going to pay very much for them. We're going to get them cheap up front. And Jeremy will tell you how we're going to do that. We're not going to spend too much, but critically important, we're fully funded. This is not a little pharma company that's going to be raising money and raising money. We're fully funded. And we're going to spend 2-3 million per asset. And then Jeremy's got a huge knowledge and background on the business development side. So every week, every month, we'll be talking to Big Pharma. So if any one of these assets work, it's many hundreds of millions. And just look why I say it's unique. Jeremy's last company, Inflamazone, was $500 million up front and potentially $1 billion. That's almost 60x return on shareholders' value. The only other company in the whole of Europe is doing something like we're doing is Evotec in Germany. It changed focus. It was a CRO 4 or 5 years ago, 300 or 400 million market cap, sharp price 3 or 4p. Just look at Ergomed today. Not Ergomed, Evotec today. Sharp price is 43, 44, 10x uplift, 7.5 billion. So that's no pressure to Jeremy. I will be hanging around more often, but that's the kind of uplift, 10x. So without further ado, Jeremy can tell us how we're going to do that 10x. I'm actually thinking this is probably one of the most exciting opportunities outside of Open Orphan. Over to you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathal. Appreciate the colourful introduction. Yes, I'm very excited to be on board, and I appreciate the audience here tonight for joining us, which for a presentation is quite different to the last one, but congratulations to them. So as Cathal said, we inherited assets from Open Orphan when we spun out. We're, as I say, relatively new. We're just 3 months out. And we've started going with what we've inherited is down here on the bottom, POLB 001. This is an immunomodulator for severe influenza, and we've got plans in place to move this rapidly into the clinic. There'll be a recurring theme through this presentation about speed and being cost effective, and I'll speak about those. So I'll talk about that later on. On the left-hand side, what I'm very excited about is, as Cathal said, we've got a very unique data set. where we're going to interrogate all of this by artificial intelligence. And that technology is, as you know, relatively new. As computer power has increased, we're now in a position to be able to mine this challenge data, this infectious challenge data, to see how the immune system is responding to an infection, and then coming up with new targets and new drugs to target those. So we'll be very unique in this. This is something that pharma isn't even doing because our data set is so unique. And I'll speak a bit about that. And from the other things we inherited, Predict Viral, I have one slide on that. This is we filed new IP on this last week around diagnosing pre-symptoms. Who's going to get a severe infection, who isn't. And again, fascinating. The biology of this is just absolutely fascinating. You could do a full presentation on this alone, but obviously not tonight. And then I won't touch upon our vaccine discovery platform, but from an infectious disease standpoint, there's 3 legs to the stool. There's therapeutics, there's vaccines and diagnostics, and we're playing in all 3 of those. But as Cathal said, we're very interested in bringing in other complementary programs as well to run them through our very efficient programs and get key clinical data, which is what pharma wants. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. I won't dwell on this. The team is absolutely outstanding. We've built a team with great experience, great knowledge, great success, and I think I won't dwell on this too much. We've complemented with again a terrific board across a business experience across the industry, many decades, and including Luke O'Neill, who's a thought leader in immunology. And Luke has been a fantastic asset since he joined the company back as when we were founding back in the early summer, and he brings a lot of wealth of knowledge and experience. Me in particular, I will spend a minute. I'm a PhD scientist by training. I'm almost 19 years now in the industry, starting off in the US, in California, working for a company called Genentech, and then moving back to Europe 2009, working for companies in the UK, Germany, and Ireland. So great experience. I've got the Rolodex, let's use the old terminology, of all the pharma contacts, all the pharma BD. And we know that pharma are always looking for products. If you look at their pipeline, roughly half of their pipeline is in license, brought in from other companies. So we will leverage that knowledge, leverage that connections, and be the deal maker of choice for pharma who want to do deals in the infectious disease space. And given what's gone on in the last 20 months, there'll be a lot of activity. And this is summarized here. I think 2015, there were warning signs that we should be aware of a global pandemic, and people ignored it. We know now, 20 months later, what the impact on human health and global economy has been. And there's a demand on pharma and a demand on the industry and governments that this will not happen again. So everybody's gearing up to the next preparedness for the next pandemic. And that's where Poolbeg will be. The market is expected to be 250 billion by 2025. Again, as I say, that's across therapeutics, vaccines, and diagnostics where we're playing. And we plan to be the partner of choice for pharma to give them the assets that they're looking for to fill their pipelines. And I say we'll do the early de-risking at a very low cost, and then pharma will take that on board and bring it forward into a more robust phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials to get the data they need for approval and marketing. That we leave that to pharma, that's their expertise. And this is a slide about how we are different. There's many biotechs out there who bring in money, they spend it all on one program, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, that's it, they're done. And a lot of time you get gray area ambiguous data. So we don't plan to take that at all. We won't be spending on full phase 2 clinical trials and spending our hard earned investments. So what we plan to do is take this multiple shots on goal approach, and we'll be capital light. So it's a case about bringing in clinical or near clinical programs, spending 2 to 3 million each program, and using these human viral challenge studies that hVIVO have brought on board and are experts in. And we'll get results in 12 to 18 months. This is human data, and this is what pharma seek, what they crave, what they're passionate about. They can't make big decisions without human data. You can have all the preclinical data you want, but once you have human data, that's what gets pharma excited. So we'll be there ready to have discussions as we're going through the development path, and having multiple discussions with pharma and creating a bit of a bidding war. And as Cathal said, you do one deal and it's for eye-watering amounts, and I'll talk about that later on. So the plan is to bring in multiple programs as well as pushing on our internal programs, as well as sourcing our finding from our internal programs, new targets, new drugs, and then develop them rapidly. So we've got a clear growth and partnering strategy. As I say, we won't plan to bring this forward ourselves. We're not going to be a fully integrated biotech company. We'll do the early de-risking and be very clever with the spend. As I say, monetize 5 or 6 assets, frequent partnering. As we know, any one of these deals could bring in 700 million, and we'll be cash generating from this income from these deal terms. And I just have a few examples over the last few years. And I think it's worth pointing out that infectious disease deals were relatively few and far between before the pandemic hit. And now that's accelerating because pharma, they turn on a sixpence and they realize that there actually is money in infectious diseases, given the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna experiences in the COVID vaccines. So now they're looking at the other viruses, other infectious diseases, where they should put their money, where they put their bets. So a couple of examples here. This is a territorial deal. Revire licensed Liam by 120 million upfront for RSV, a space that we work in. Merck acquired Oncommune, who had a COVID program, 425 million upfront to take the company out. And then Pfizer at a relatively niche infectious disease area, Lyme disease, 130 million upfront. So if you get that human proof of concept, human data, this is where Pfizer gets very interested, and we plan to play in that space. Cathal mentioned Infectious, the last company I worked with, founded in 2016. We raised 55 million from venture capital financing, so private equity, and we exited last year, acquired by Roche, for 380 million euros upfront and significant downstream milestones. And I think what's key, what's worth pointing out, is that we had phase 1 safety data. That's where you put it in healthy volunteers, and we had our molecules in one patient. And it showed efficacy in one patient, and that was enough to Roche to come on board and swoop us and take us out. And they're moving that forward now themselves in multiple disease areas. And I say it's a good exit for our investors. And of course, from a financing standpoint, this was just announced last month, where the White House has been very proactive to invest up to $65 billion in preparing for future pandemics. And we've already been in touch with the folks at DARPA about looking at our lead program and potentially funding that. So there's a lot of, as I say, a lot of appetite for funding these programs, particularly from governments, and for reasons I gave earlier about not having a next pandemic to deal with. What's interesting right now is we're starting our lead program in influenza. And as I say, we're all sick and tired of viruses I can only imagine. And a new word I heard last month was this twindemic, which had me rolling my eyes. But I think it's valid concerns that we're still in the presence of COVID. As you know, the numbers are still quite high, particularly in the UK and elsewhere. But what people are afraid of is what's coming from an influenza standpoint. I mean, influenza has been quiet for the last 20 months because people have been socially distancing. They've been mask wearing and washing their hands. But the concern is now, as the world returns to relative normality, that influenza will come roaring back, and that's a grave concern. And this is a slide that we pulled out last month, presented by the World Health Organization. And you can see down on the bottom right here, this is the incidence of influenza in India. So you can see it's been very flat over the last number of years, and now influenza virus is coming back. I actually just got my own flu vaccine today, just in preparation. But there's the concern of, to the healthcare system, that influenza comes roaring back, and the COVID pandemic is still here, they're going to be overwhelmed. So grave concerns about viruses and their potential to, again, cause even more havoc than what they've been doing. So a couple of slides on our lead program. It's for severe influenza. And it's a program that targets a protein called MAP kinase, and I'll talk a little bit about that, P38 MAP kinase. But in an average year, influenza affects 1 in 8 people. 5 to 10 million of these are hospitalized, 12% of these are life-threatening, and there's 500,000 deaths. And I think in years gone by, that was people relatively accepted that these things happen. But I think post-pandemic, post-COVID, there'll be demands to get this number down, and Poolbeg can certainly help in that space. I said there are vaccines out there, I mentioned, but there's a scramble every year to identify the strain of influenza that's emerging and rapidly generating these vaccines in eggs. And it's a long time, it's a bit of guesswork, and the efficacy isn't that great. We're used to better. And I think from a flu standpoint, there's a narrow window for therapeutics. Tamiflu is one example where on its label, you can only give this drug within 48 hours of symptoms, and after that it's useless. It's a viral replication inhibitor. So basically, if you already have symptoms, 48 hours after symptoms, there's too much virus on board for this antiviral to have an effect. And this market was once over $1 billion. And as I say, hospitalization that follows from that, there's nothing there for you. And that's where POLB 001 comes in. Because what drives the severe flu is a cytokine storm. And what triggers the cytokine storm is the activation of P38. And we've got a small molecule inhibitor of P38 that blocks that progression. So we block that progression of severe flu and reduce the death rate accordingly. So we've got plans coming next year to get this into the clinic. And I'll talk a little bit about these plans later on, but potential to be a blockbuster for severe influenza. But of course, in other diseases. I mean, it's well known that these cytokine storms occur in other diseases, other viral diseases, so there's a potential to go broader, so this market could expand for us. And this is our program, POLB 001. It's the market now is expected to be 800 million, if not greater. Peak sales from the analysts are 275 million for our product alone, but again, label expansions to other diseases. It's a phase 2 ready small molecule P38 inhibitor. It's already been in the clinic for rheumatoid arthritis. It didn't work, so now we're repositioning this based on data that the team at hVIVO have generated, that P38 has a significant role to play in severe influenza. The molecule is ours. We got worldwide rights, and we're moving that forward. It's safe and well tolerated. As I say, it's already been in the clinic. We've got ex vivo outside of the the body efficacy for influenza, and we filed lots of intellectual property. We're protected out to 2038. It was granted in Europe towards the end of last year, and more recently we got very positive response from the US PTO that this will be granted in the very near future with a few minor corrections to the application. So very excited about that potential, because this helps us. This will block anybody else from moving into the severe influenza space with P38. So we've got market exclusivity in that regard. So we've got a clear development plan. We've got a chief medical officer on contract, and we've got plans to put it into humans next year. We've got manufacturing in place, and that's moving along, formulation in place, all of these boxes that need to be checked from a drug development standpoint. So very excited about this, getting data from this, towards the middle end of next year. So that's going to be very exciting. And again, as I say, potential to expand beyond severe influenza into other viral diseases. So that's the lead program, POLB 001, moving along nicely. What's coming behind, I think, is from a data analysis standpoint, I think it's been said that data is the new mining, where the new gold. We're going after lots of data that we have that hVIVO have generated using artificial intelligence, and we've got a number of deals on the table that we're working through. And why is this different? And I think this is a very important slide about how we're different. A lot of time for pharma, there's patients will come into the doc's office, will come into hospital already sick, and they take blood samples and they work their way back from that, trying to figure out what's going on, why are they sick, what's driving the disease. So we've got a different approach, again, coming from the stable of Open Orphan and hVIVO, where we're bringing in healthy volunteers. These are people who are, they're screened, they're identified as healthy. We bring them into the quarantine unit. We take their blood at day -1, so we know what they look like when they're healthy. And then from that, we give them virus, and we track the progress, we track the course of disease, and we're taking sampling all the way along. And these are blood samples, these are nasal samples, these are looking at digital biomarkers, their heart rate, their temperature, etc. And we're able to track all of this data forward, and we can understand what happens in a severe disease setting, what happens in moderate disease, what happens in mild disease. And when we collaborate with the AI companies, they'll take all of this data set, and they'll be able to work their way back to identify what are the targets that are being active, what are the targets that the virus is triggering, that the immune system is using. And then when we block those, we have new targets for new effective therapies. So very exciting in this space. This is, as I said, unique. This is unique to Poolbeg. And we already have data in flu, HRV, and RSV, and COVID data, malaria data coming. So we can go beyond the standard viruses and build from there. And this is just a quick snapshot of what we have. We have a facility where we have 300,000 individual samples stored at -80 degrees in 22 freezers. So this is all data that's sitting there, but now we have the wherewithal, now we have the capabilities to use and analyze this data, identifying new targets and new drug compounds that we can put through the clinic. We announced just last week, we've started on our pathway. We have a deal with Eurofins, who are going to do a lot of the gene expression analysis of these samples. And we also have other samples coming behind it that we're working towards. And as I say, we're going to focus initially on RSV, and we're going to focus on influenza, to see where this takes us. And I think this bottom of the slide summarizes what we're going to do. We're going to analyze these samples to uncover common protective pathways, what the body normally uses and what the virus circumvents. We're going to identify what these pathways are and what's useful in the clinic, and then new drugs and drug targets that can be repositioned. Ideally, they've been in the clinic and they've been proven to be safe and effective, and then we can take these forward and do our clinical studies, again, for relatively modest costs. And that's how we're going to, again, how we are different and how we're going to circumvent that expensive clinical trials that people tend to head down. I do want to spend a minute on PredictViral. Again, we filed intellectual property on this approach last week. Again, this is on the diagnostic side, as I say, that's another feather in our cap of infectious disease, and a very exciting technology where we can identify through gene expression analysis very early in the disease cycle who is going to progress to severe disease and who isn't. So you can appreciate the value of this, in a community setting. If somebody comes down sick and you screen everybody else, you can identify the patients that have caught the virus and move them to the side, and then you look after them and give them aggressive antiviral therapies, separate them from the crowd, as it were, so that the spread doesn't carry on. So as I say, we filed patents on that on a very interesting platform that we plan to progress in collaboration with Big Pharma, big diagnostics companies, because again, leveraging their knowledge and expertise in this space. So again, a very exciting technology that only we have, and we're very excited about that and moving that forward. So that's, as I said, 3 aspects of what we have already. I will comment that we have multiple discussions ongoing about in-licensing programs. I think pre-pandemic, there was a lot of infectious disease programs that were pushed forward, maybe ignored, not invested heavily enough. But now is the time to bring them into Poolbeg and run it through our system, our capital light, clinically efficient system to get human clinical data and partner with pharma. So my last slide here as a summary, this is a substantial market right now that's growing very rapidly, 250 billion by 2025. The capital light and multiple shots on goal will, as I say, de-risks each individual program, but any one deal will see us generate significant revenue from pharma partnering. And as I say, the lead program, very exciting, is the POLB 001 for severe influenza, a large unmet need. And as we saw, with the data coming out of India, there is concerns that in years to come that these influenza pandemics will rage, and we need better drugs and new drugs for these, and we plan to participate. And again, it's great to have all the excellent science and all this excellent data, but it can't be executed without an outstanding team, and that's what we have. Lots of experience across the board. As I say, we've done this before, we've been successful before, we plan to be successful again with Poolbeg Pharma. So on that, as my last slide, I'll stop, and again, happy to take any questions from the audience or from Donald indeed.
Jeremy, thank you so much. Cathal, thank you so much indeed. You've packed so much in there. Let's just keep the flow going and talk to you about POLB 001, the influenza immune modulator. Talk us through the next steps. 6 to 9 months in that particular area. What are the next things to happen? What are the timeframes, and how much is it going to cost, and how are you going to fund it?
Sure, Donald. No, sure. I mean, we will fund it obviously by the IPO proceeds, but where we are right now is, as I say, it's a ready-made baby in a sense that we have just completed a campaign around non-GMP manufacturing that we'll use for formulations. These are all multiple steps when it comes to drug development, where we've selected a vendor for GMP manufacturing that we'll announce very soon. And again, different levels of quality. We're working closely with a formulations company to get the formulations going. We're going to have this. I mean, if you can imagine somebody with severe flu being kind of prone and prostrate in the hospital. So we're decided we're going to take the IV route here, so intravenous drug administration. So we're working on a formulation for that, which is good. So we'll be in humans by the middle of next year to test this proof of concept, in an inflammatory setting. So we're going to get humans and give them, inflame them, and then we'll watch the POLB 001 work its magic, and then take it forward very rapidly there into patients thereafter. And once we have that, I mean, initially having that anti-inflammatory data might be enough to partner with pharma, but they may come back and say we want to see the influenza data, and we've got plans in place for that. So that's all, as I say, very efficient, very capital light. So we will have very interesting data on the inflammation aspects towards the second half of next year, obviously when this initial human challenge trial runs.
Okay, we've got the super cold just about hit us this winter, and we're just about to, as you say, you've had your flu jab. To what extent are these heading in the right direction, as it were, for Poolbeg?
Yeah, I mean, if I understand, I mean, the market, I mean, as I say, pharma is funny. They're sometimes like lemmings, like they turn and, their head turns, whatever next, and they all rush in one direction. And I think right now they're all rushing in the infectious disease direction. and as pharma knows, like they have army of scientists and chemists working in the background. But, pick any pharma, J&J, Pfizer, Merck. If you look at their pipelines, they in-license so many, like up to half, maybe sometimes more of their programs are in-licensed from small biotechs or mid-sized biotechs.
Well, they need you to find
exactly.
the drugs.
They look to the experts, and then they pay big money to bring it in. And again, inflazoma is a great example where we were the experts in NLRP3 was our target. Again, we were in inflammation, which is similar to Poolbeg, so I bring a lot of knowledge across. But they were watching and waiting, and as soon as they saw clinical data, they pulled the trigger. It's time to acquire this company. And Roche were the winners, but there were several other pharma companies in the running, but Roche won out in the end, and really good company to work with. But they're always scrambling. I've got, as I mentioned earlier on, showing my age, the Rolodexes. You have all Rolodex of the BD teams, and part of the scouts is to look for new programs, look for new technologies, look for new partnerships. And I say infectious disease is front and center for a lot of these pharmas right now. So they'll be looking to companies like ours, and when we have clinical data, that's when the scramble begins, and they'll be wanting to come on board and partner with Poolbeg. And as you saw, some of the eye-watering numbers for some of the deals. I mean, from as I say, our IPO was just 3 months ago, but we'll be revenue generating very rapidly. On our first deal, we'll be self-sufficient, and we don't plan to raise any money thereafter.
So you mentioned there the 25 million you raised in July.
Yep.
Do you have any news for us on acquisitions, licensing agreements? Presumably what you have in mind is a buy and build type thing as you build out Poolbeg.
Correct. Yeah, correct. We're multiple due diligence, and I say this with a smile on my face because we're building out the team, but we have a fantastic team of guys, and girls who, they've so much knowledge in the space. We're doing these due diligence on these interesting assets. Some of them are viral, some of them are inflammation. So obviously we're not ready to announce yet. We want to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in these deals and these collaborations. But there'll be announcements coming without question. And I say we build.
What field might the first announcement be likely to be in?
I think safe to say virology, because that's our expertise right now. So we have a lot of spaces, a lot of opportunities in that. And again, what's interesting is as the word of Poolbeg got out, and again, I give Cathal a lot of credit with his network. People turn to us and says, "I've had this asset. We brought it as far as we could, and now we want somebody else to bring it into the clinic." And we're sitting there, kind of, lapping these up in a certain sense. But obviously, we have to agree on the correct terms and the correct development plan. All these things take a little bit of time. We've got a fantastic team behind us here at Poolbeg that we're working with to select the best opportunities, and then we move them forward rapidly.
Okay, talking about that fantastic team, we've got that great man Cathal sitting there doing nothing. So let's pull him in.
Never does nothing. Never does nothing.
I know he's sitting there doing some work. I'm sure he is. So let's pull Cathal in and we'll ask him 2 or 3 questions. Why not? Okay. So let's talk about Open Orphan. How does the ongoing commercial relationship between Open Orphan, the parent, and Poolbeg, how's that going to work? How you've got access to each other's data and so on and so forth. But give us some nuts and bolts as to how that might work commercially. Who's gaining? I'm sure you're both gaining symbiotically. How is it going to work?
Yeah, Donald, I think, look, first of all, I'm still in the office in London and Poolbeg, or with the office is Poolbeg and as I say, Open Orphan on the walls, both in the office in London. So first of all, look, it's shared. The big reality is you've been around long enough, I've been around long. Most people listening tonight invest in a range of small AIM-listed companies, and it's just they all build out this big management team and they pay them a fortune. And so we're trying to do with Poolbeg. The only full-time employee is Jeremy. I'm helping out, Ian's helping out, and then we have a bunch of the scientific team, 50% in Poolbeg, 50% in Open Orphan. So that's unbelievable synergies, and that Jeremy has access to 250 scientists, and he pays for 2 or 3 of them. So that's the synergies across there. I think, look, to really understand where the company's going to go is look at a peer. We always look direction, you look at the company, and I keep saying the peer is Evotech in Germany. And we're fast followers. Elena Sullivan came in, she's an Open Orphan director, and she's Cathal, look, she's Scottish with an Irish accent. She's Cathal, look, you really should look at, they've come with the roots from 0. The minute they left their 0 roots, they've had a 10x uplift, went from 400 million to 7 billion in 4 years. So that's, to answer your question, Donald, I think I know a lot of investors saying, well, why bother about Poolbeg? But I would say, anybody who came into the IPO Open Orphan, we IPO'd at 5p, 5.7p, we went to 48p. Okay, it's back down a bit now, but I would say bear with us. We're still up 4x from the IPO. Germany's only starting, and we have, look, my role will be to keep news flow, get things in. So we've settled in. The first bit of news flow this past week, I think we've a clear mandate in the company. I told Jeremy we need an RNS every second week, if not every week. So I think all I'd say for anybody listening and watching tonight, Poolbeg is going to get busy. We have to have more assets. There's a lot of negotiation underway. We will have those 6 or 8 assets. Any one of them will be the inflammasome, the $500 million up front. And it's unique. So I think it's the combination of the 2 of them. You do need the roots and the CRO to know how to do it. You need to know how to get the shortcuts. and you need to have all the multiple irons in the fire, and then it's the synergies in the same office. Chinese walls, no doubt, between us, but yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
That was the question, Don.
That's a good answer. What kind of milestones can we expect over the next 6 to 8 months then? We're looking out ahead, but not too far ahead, 6 to 8 months. What's going to be happening?
Well, I'd say maybe, and again, my role now, I'm reasonably busy. I'm sure people know tonight, but one of the 2 full-time jobs open up. But like we've said, Jeremy, is that the milestones is by Christmas. We need at least 1 or 2 more products on top of POLB 001. That should happen. We need 2 or 3 more by the springtime. I have a goal. We need 6 of these damn things. And I say these damn because it's a lottery. You get your number, you got to work them. And then I think Jeremy, look, is clear. AI, we've got access. And look, bear in mind, Open Orphan retain the data. People are worried, oh, where the data travel? It's still sitting in their reservoirs, but Poolbeg is access to this, using it. So I think AI, Jeremy, what else? A couple of AI deals, a few more deals, and who knows, by springtime, maybe an out-license, a revenue deal, some revenue coming back into us.
I mean,
over to you, Jeremy.
I should say, like the AI deal is the starting point, which is great to mine the data. But what comes out the other end, and these are very efficient, could be 3, 4, 5 months where you get these new exciting targets to be beginning to work on. And I've been involved in deals in the past at Genentech where we're doing deals just on targets. So as Cathal said, you could just identify a new therapeutic target for an infectious disease, a viral infectious disease, and you can partner with that with pharma. But we've got multiple opportunities here from a revenue generation standpoint for building the company, obviously, and as I said, pushing it forward and creating shareholder value.
Okay, last question. Where will Poolbeg Pharma be in 2 years' time? What will it look like in 2 years' time? Briefly.
$1 billion market cap. No pressure.
Say that again.
$1 billion market cap. No pressure, Jeremy.
And what's your take on that, Jeremy?
Billy, I really like Cathal's optimism, but yeah, we're going to be building like a multi-tiered pipeline. I think that's the key thing here. We're going to build a team. We're going to have multiple products pushing through the clinical and partnering. We're going to be a partner of choice for pharma. So we're going to be deal after deal. As I say, I spent almost 20 years in the industry doing deals, with a scientific background. That's the fun part. But as I say, let pharma take it and take on the risk and the cost and push it forward, get it on the market. That's their expertise.
Okay, Jeremy, Cathal, senior management team at Poolbeg Pharma, thank you so much for joining us this evening.